The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors have been proudly serving the people of this community since 1918. Service is our motto. The poor, the rich, the middle class and all are given the best of care and attention at all times. You have the privilege to select what you want. In your time of need, contact the capable, the competent, and the dependable staff of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home who is genuinely concerned with your care. At J.W. Williams Funeral Home, you are aptly served by the proprietor president, Deacon Arthur L. Parker, who continues the traditions and values set forth by the past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams. Your announcers for the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Sunday morning program are Deacon Arthur L. Parker, Reverend Isaac H. Owens, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, Minister Frankie Harmon, Ms. Sandra Johnson, and Deacon Earl Clark, Jr.
Thank you, and good morning, friends. We come to you this morning to bring announcements, dedications, and songs. We certainly hope that your day may be brighter after listening to our program. The family of Miss Joyce Ann Whitis Polk of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Henry Cleveland Gaines Jr. of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mother Bobby Lou Anthony Woodham, age 101 of DeSoto, Georgia. The family of the infant McKinney Latanya Royal of Sylvester, Georgia, would like to thank their many friends for the food, the flowers, the condolences, and all other expressions of sympathy and kindness shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. Miss Joyce Ann Whitis Polk, age 63, of 753 Hatley Road, Cordele, Georgia, died Monday, October 2nd, at the home of her daughter in Wanakee, Iowa. The funeral service for Miss Joyce Ann Whitis Polk, age 63, was held Thursday, October 19th, in the sanctuary of the Cornerstone Ministry Church of God by Faith in Cordele, Georgia. The pastor, Elder James Patterson, delivered the eulogy. Apostle Morris Jones officiated. The burial followed at the Big Poplar Springs Baptist Church Cemetery in Unadilla, Georgia. Survivors include her beloved fiancé, Mr. Walter Quarterman of Fitzgerald, Georgia, her loving and devoted children, Mrs. Katrina Jeffries and her husband, Mr. Buford Jeffries of Clarksville, Tennessee, and Mrs. Kawana Jones and her husband, Mr. Morris Jones of Wanakee, Iowa. 4 beloved grandchildren, 1 great-grandchild, her loving and devoted sister, Mrs. Sarah Williamson, and her husband, Mr. Ernest Williamson of Cordele, Georgia. 1 beloved brother, Dr. Matthew Wayne Whitis of Cordele, Georgia. 4 sisters-in-law, Miss Dorothy Owens, Miss Claretha Whitis, and Mrs. Carolyn Thomas, all of Cordele, Georgia, and Miss Joyce Brown of Warner Robins, Georgia. Her beloved aunts and uncles, Deacon Aaron Wallace and his wife, Mrs. Mary Wallace of Cordele, Georgia, Mrs. Annie Eva Wallace and Mother Calden Wallace, both of Vienna, Georgia. A host of beloved nieces, nephews, cousins, Other relatives and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Miss Joyce Ann Whitis Polk, age 63, of 753 Hatley Road, Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Henry Cleveland Gaines Jr., age 73, of 1011 South 10th Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Thursday, October 12th, at his residence in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Henry Cleveland Gaines Jr., age 73, was held Saturday, October 21st, in the chapel of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home in Cordele, Georgia. His beloved son, Minister Jason Gaines, officiated. The burial followed at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted children, Mrs. Michelle Smith and her husband, Mr. Frederick Smith of Cordele, Georgia, Minister Jason Gaines and his wife, Mrs. Shalonda Gaines of Hawkinsville, Georgia, Mrs. Connie West and her husband, Mr. Kelvin West of Cordele, Georgia, Miss Chastity Green and her husband, Mr. Travis Green of Vienna, Georgia, Miss Keisha Gaines of Cordele, Georgia, and Miss Sonia Gaines of Atlanta, Georgia. 17 beloved grandchildren, 18 great-grandchildren, a beloved brother, Mr. Walter Gaines, and his wife, Mrs. Sarah Gaines of Cordele, Georgia, his sisters-in-law, Mrs. Christine Gaines, Mrs. Leslie Gaines, Mrs. Georgia May Gaines, and Mrs. Emma K. Odom, a host of nieces, nephews, to include Mr. Jesse Gaines, Miss Belinda Horn, Miss Vivian Gaines, and a host of cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends, to include Judge Gail Sim, Mr. Eric Walker, Mr. J.C. Daniels, Mr. Elijah Reese, and Mr. Joseph Bell, survived Mr. Henry Cleveland Gaines Jr., age 73, of 1011 South 10th Street, Cordele, Georgia. Mother Bobby Lou Anthony Woodham, age 101, of 214 Railroad Street, DeSoto, Georgia, died Thursday, October 12th, at her residence in DeSoto, Georgia. The funeral service for Mother Bobby Lou Anthony Woodham, age 101, was held Saturday, October 21st, in the sanctuary of the Zion Hill Baptist Church in Leslie, Georgia. The Reverend W. James Hill, pastor, her pastor, the Reverend James Thomas, pastor of the Friendship Baptist Church of DeSoto, Georgia, officiated. The burial followed at the Council Cemetery in Leslie, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Mrs. Bernice Spivey of Jacksonville, Florida, Deacon John Woodham and his wife, Mrs. Queen Woodham of Abbeville, Georgia, Mr. Willie Woodham of Maryland, Mrs. Marilyn Cleckley of DeSoto, Georgia, Mr. Charles Woodham and his wife, Mrs. Alice Woodham of Americus, Georgia, Mr. Bobby E. Woodham and his wife, Mrs. Alexis Woodham of DeSoto, Georgia, Mr. Benny Woodham and his wife, Mrs. Janice Woodham, and Mr. Lawrence Woodham, both of Americus, Georgia, and Mrs. Connie W. Whitehead and her husband, Mr. Gerald Whitehead of Leslie, Georgia. 32 beloved grandchildren, a host of great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, a host of nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mother Bobby Lou Anthony Woodham, age 101, of 214 Railroad Street, DeSoto, Georgia. The infant McKinney Latonya Royal of 207 East Kelly Street, Sylvester, Georgia, died Sunday, October 15th at Navison Health in Macon, Georgia. Survivors include her loving parents, Mr. Douglas and Miss Jessica Royal of Sylvester, Georgia, her sister, Miss London M. Royal of Sylvester, Georgia, her grandparents, Miss Annette Williams of Sylvester, Georgia, Mrs. Regina Mathis and her husband, Sir John Mathis of Vienna, Georgia, Mr. Douglas Royal Sr. of Cordele, Georgia, and Mr. Gus Williams of Vienna, Georgia. Her great-grandparents, Mrs. Neat Wyndham of Cordele, Georgia, and Elder Joseph Dobbins and Elder Vanessa Dobbins of Vienna, Georgia. Her uncle, Mr. Shelton L. Dobbins, and Mr. Ferris D. Royal, both of Vienna, Georgia. A host of other relatives survived. The infant McKinney Latonya Royal of 207 East Kelly Street, Sylvester, Georgia. Again, the family of Miss Joyce Ann Whitis Polk of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Henry Cleveland Gaines Jr. of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mother Bobby Lou Anthony Woodham, age 101, of DeSoto, Georgia. The family of the infant McKinney Latonya Royal of Sylvester, Georgia. Would like to thank their many friends for all of the many kindnesses shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. May God bless each of you is their prayer. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors serving Cordele and Vienna were in charge of each of these arrangements during the past week. And now, it is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcement. Deacon Ezel Shelton Jr., age 92, 103 Burton Circle, Americus, Georgia, died Saturday, October 14th, at the Magnolia Manor of Marion County in Buena Vista, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted daughters, Miss Betty Shelton of Americus, Georgia, Miss Peggy Shelton of Ellenwood, Georgia, Miss Bernice Allen of Decatur, Georgia, Mrs. Dolores Strover and her husband, Mr. Ernest Strover of Rex, Georgia, Miss Laura Shelton of Hampton, Georgia, and Mrs. Deborah Williams and her husband, Sir George Williams of Stockbridge, Georgia. His beloved and caring sons, Mr. Michael Chilton of Flint, Michigan, Mr. Ezel Shelton and his wife, Mrs. Carla Shelton of St. Rose, Louisiana, and Mr. Rodney Shelton and his wife, Mrs. Tristan Shelton of Americus, Georgia. 19 beloved grandchildren, 35 great-grandchildren, and 6 great-great-grandchildren. His loving sisters, Mrs. Verdale Walker, Mrs. Ozabelle Logan, and Ms. Rosa Betts, all of Flint, Michigan. Mrs. Desi Floyd of Americus, Georgia. A beloved brother, Mr. James Shelton, and his wife, Mrs. Eileen Shelton of Flint, Michigan. His beloved sisters-in-law, Mrs. Frances Merritt of Plains, Georgia, and Miss Mary Shelton of Flint, Michigan. A host of nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. Deacon Ezel Shelton Jr., age 92, of 103 Burton Circle, Americus, Georgia. The funeral service for Deacon Ezel Shelton Jr., age 92, will be held today, Sunday, October 22nd at 2:30 p.m. in the sanctuary of the Friendship Baptist Church in Americus, Georgia. Bishop Melvin McCluster, his pastor, the Reverend Dan Shealy, pastor of the Mount Zion Webster Baptist Church, will officiate. The burial will follow at Staley Memorial Garden in Americus, Georgia. Mrs. Ann Quinette Anderson Bryant, age 61, of 1969 Laurel Lane, Decatur, Georgia, died Tuesday, October 17th at Amis Case Hospice in Decatur, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted husband, Mr. Melvin Nelson of Decatur, Georgia, her loving and devoted daughter, Miss Laquilla Ross, and her husband, Mr. Evan Ross, her beloved mother, Mrs. Christine Bird Anderson of Vienna, Georgia, her loving sisters, Miss Phoebe Paradis of Vienna, Georgia, Miss Clenditas Anderson of Warner Robins, Georgia, a beloved brothers, Mr. Russell Brown and Mr. Demetrius Passmo, both of Vienna, Georgia, and Mr. McKees Brown of Detroit, Michigan, a host of nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. Ann Quinette Anderson Bryant, age 61, of 1969 Laura Lane, Decatur, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Ann Quinette Anderson Bryant, age 61, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors, serving Cordele and Vienna, are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Friends, that conclude our funeral notices for this morning, and as always, we do remind you concerning our pre-funeral arrangements planning available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home, with packages available with a single pay, a 3-year pay, a 5-year pay, and a 10-year pay. So please stop by and talk with us concerning your pre-funeral arrangements needs available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. And also whole life insurance is available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.
And now for announcements. The Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church of The Drayton community installation of their new pastor, Reverend Gregory B. Moy Sr., will be on Sunday, October 22nd, beginning at 2:30 p.m. Regular worship service will be held at 11 o'clock a.m. Dinner will be served immediately following the installation program. Everyone has a cordial invitation to attend. Reverend Gregory B. Moy Sr., pastor-elect. The new Poplar Spring Baptist Church Breast Cancer Awareness Month program will be on Sunday, October 22nd, today, beginning at 9:45 a.m. Mrs. Sarah Walker of Macon County will be the guest speaker. Everyone has a cordial invitation to attend. Pastor Johnny Dean, pastor, teacher. Freedom Harvest Worship Center Fall Revival will begin on Monday, October 22nd through Thursday, October 26th. Our program will be Monday, Bishop Melvin McCluster; Tuesday, Bishop George Edge; Wednesday, Minister Belinda Cutts Tyson; Thursday, Pastor Shirley Strawder. Freedom Harvest Youth Day, expressing themselves in song and dance, will be held on Sunday, October 29th at 9 a.m. Dr. Georgia Deriso is the pastor. The McAfee Grove Baptist Church Community Fellowship Day will be on Sunday, October 29th at 9 o'clock a.m. Pastor Anthony Walker will deliver the message. Everyone is asked to wear a mask. Food will be served after the service. You're invited to worship with McAfee Grove on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock p.m., small class study on Thursday at 7 p.m., and Sunday morning worship each Sunday at 9 a.m. You may join them by calling 425-436-6341. Access code 708-058. Minister Tawandi Daniels, Secretary. Dr. Robert L. Morgan Sr. is the pastor. The New Jerusalem Baptist Church of Americas will observe Reverend Tony Smith's 5th anniversary, October 31st through November 5th. The following will be their nightly guests. Tuesday, October 31st, 7 p.m., Pastor Morrow Harris. Wednesday, November 1st, 7 p.m., Pastor Carl Smith. Thursday, November 2nd, 7 p.m., Pastor Anthony Walker. The anniversary will climax on Sunday, November 5th, Sunday school at 9:30 a.m., worship service at 11 a.m. with Reverend Kenny Gooch delivering the message. Dinner will be served following the service. Deacon Charles Spurlow, chairman of deacons. Reverend Tony Smith is the pastor. The New Corinth Baptist Church invites everyone to worship with them each third Sunday at 10 o'clock a.m. Reverend Carl Smith is the pastor. The St. King Baptist Church Cordial Family and Friends Day will be observed today, Sunday, October 22nd at 10:15 a.m. The pastor, Reverend Woody C. Burnham, will deliver the message. At 2:30 p.m., Reverend Keith Lewis will deliver the message. The Creek Boys will provide musical selections. Reverend Woody C. Burnham is the pastor. The Davis Chapel CMB Church will celebrate Cancer Awareness Day today, October 22nd. Brunch will be served, and they're inviting you to dress down for this occasion. Steward Ruby L. Barrett, chairman of stewards. Reverend Arnell Wilburn is the pastor. The Greater Mars Tabernacle Baptist Church Annual Men's Day will be today, Sunday, October 22nd at 9:30 a.m. Deacon Anthony Robinson of the New Beulah Baptist Church will be the guest speaker. Deacon Arthur L. Parker, chairman of deacons. Dr. K.M. Williams is the pastor. The Concerned Citizens That Care are collecting items to help feed some needy families in our community during the holiday season. If you would like to contribute to this worthy cause by making a donation or by donating items for food boxes, contact Brother Johnny Dennis at 229-322-8163 or Sister Barbara Dennis at 229-322-8162. All donations will be highly appreciated. The Mount Zion First African Baptist Church conference call scheduled for Sunday morning at 10 a.m., prayer Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 12 o'clock noon. Bible study is held each Wednesday at 5 o'clock p.m. The call-in number is 339-209-6419. Deacon Joe Wedges, chairman of deacons. Dr. Dan James III is the pastor. The Gethsemane Baptist Church invites everyone to worship with them today. Worship service begins at 10:30 a.m. Deacon Johnny Wilson, chairman of deacons. Reverend Cecil Strawder is the pastor.
You're invited to worship at the New Oak Road Baptist Church today. Sunday school at 9:15 a.m., worship service at 10 o'clock a.m. Face covering is required. Deacon Alonzo Jones, chairman of deacons. Reverend W.W. Wilson is the pastor. Everyone has a cordial invitation to worship at the beautiful Zion Baptist Church. Worship service begins at 11 o'clock a.m. Mother Grace Patrick, church mother. Reverend Lorinda Ray is the pastor. You're invited to worship at the Greater Gum Creek Baptist Church each first, second, third, and fourth Sunday, beginning at 10:30 a.m. Mother Norma Solomon, church mother. Deacon Lonnie Hagerbrook, chairman of deacons. Reverend Joseph Hagerbrook is the pastor. Everyone has a cordial invitation to worship at the Mount Calvary Baptist Church today. Sunday school begins at 9:45 a.m., worship service at 10:30 a.m. Everyone has a cordial invitation to attend. Mother Evelyn Lewis, church mother. Deacon Leon Spears, chairman of deacons. Reverend Isaac H. Owens is the pastor. We would like to remind each of you that early voting, advanced voting in person, began on October 16th and will continue through November 3rd. The times for advanced voting are 8 a.m. to 6 o'clock p.m. Saturday voting will be available on Saturday, October 28th from 9 a.m. until 5 o'clock p.m. The last day to submit an application for an absentee ballot by mail is October 27th. Election day this year is going to be held on November 7th from 7 a.m. until 7 o'clock p.m. If you need to request a ballot by mail, you may do so by going to the My Voter Secretary of State Georgia.gov website, or you may contact the elections office here in Cordele, Crisp County at 229-276-2611. And we would like to remind all citizens of Crisp County that you are eligible to vote. We do know that there is a city election for wards 1 and 4, but all citizens of Crisp County are eligible to vote because there is a splosh question on the ballot. So that entails that all citizens of Crisp County will be able to cast the ballot for that special local option sales tax question that's on the ballot. We ask that you will bear this in mind and take the opportunity to exercise your right to vote. That concludes our announcements for this morning.
And now for dedication. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following: in loving memory of Ms. Liza Barrett, who departed this life October 3rd, 2016. Dedication requested by her husband, Deacon Sammy Barrett, her beloved children, grandchildren, the entire Barrett and Crawford family, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of veteran Liza Barrett, who departed this life October 3rd, 2016. In loving memory of Mrs. Harriet Hagerbrook, who would have celebrated her birthday October 14, dedication requested by the Hagerbrook family and the members of the Mount Zion First African Baptist Church, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mrs. Ura Lee Jones, who departed this life October 18, 2017, dedication requested by her beloved children, Miss Sabrina Minnie Ann Charles Jones, her sister, Miss Dorothy Rose Jones, and the entire family, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mrs. Gail Melissa Westbrook Dawson, who departed this life October 19, 2015. Dedication requested by her son, Mr. Christopher Westbrook and Youngblood, and Mr. Calvin and Portia Westbrook Young, her beloved grandchildren, her loving mother, Mrs. Martha Ruth Westbrook, and the entire Westbrook family, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mrs. Gail Melissa Westbrook Dawson, who departed this life October 19, 2015. In loving memory of Mrs. Priscilla Cheeks, who would have celebrated her birthday October 21st, dedication requested by her beloved family, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mother Carrie Lee Levant, who departed this life October 22nd, 2018. Dedication requested by the Levant family, gone but not forgotten. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following. Special birthday anniversary wishes goes out. Happy 41st anniversary to Mr. Richard and Mrs. Brenda Cross, who celebrated their anniversary Thursday, October 19th. And also happy birthday to Mr. Richard Cross, who will celebrate his birthday Wednesday, October 21st. Dedication requested by the Cross and Napper family. Happy 41st anniversary to Mr. Richard and Mrs. Brenda Cross. God continue to bless your union and keep it strong. Happy anniversary to Mr. Norman and Miss Sabrina Fields, who celebrated their anniversary Thursday, October 19th. Dedication requested by the Fields family. God bless your union and continue to keep it strong. Happy 42nd anniversary to Deacon Earl and Mrs. Faye Leary, who will celebrate their anniversary Monday, October 23rd. Dedication requested by their children, grandchildren, their beloved mother, Mother Willie Mae Leary, and the entire Ross, Leary, and West family. Happy 42nd anniversary to Deacon Earl and Mrs. Faye Leary, who will celebrate their anniversary Monday, October 23rd. God continue to bless your union. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following. Happy birthday to Mr. Melton Dunlap, who celebrated his birthday Wednesday, October 18th. Dedication requested by his beloved wife, Elder Helen W. Dunlap, his children, his beloved mother-in-law, Mother Martha Ruth Westbrook, the entire Dunlap and Westbrook family. Happy birthday to Mr. Melton Dunlap. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following. Deacon James Smith and family, Deacon Henry King of the Gethsemane Baptist Church, Church Mother, Mother Mary Butler, Mother Leela Honey Smith and family, Mrs. Willie Mae Leary and family, Mother Grace Patrick and family, Mother Lucinda Ray and family, Mrs. Essie Gay and family, Miss Gwen Henderson and family, Miss Eda Ruth White and family, Mrs. Faye Brown and family of Araby, Georgia, Deacon and Mrs. Roger Westbrook and family, Miss Willie Mae Crapp and family, Deacon Eddie Byram and family, the entire Byram and Shivers family, Mrs. Gladys, Sister Porter and family, Mrs. Thelma, Sis Johnson and family, Mrs. Mamie Robinson and family, Deacon Kelvin and Sister Rosemary Jones and family, the Reverend and Mrs. Woody C. Barnum and family, Mrs. Lucius Bagley and family, Brother Tommy Kennedy and family, Mr. Lewis Kennedy and family, Pastor Ola Lofton and family, Chris County Tykes Commissioner, Ms. Deborah Lofton and family, Cordele City Commissioner, Ms. Vesta Shepherd and family, Chris County Coroner, Deacon Ricky Dawson and family, Deacon and Mrs. Sam Mumphrey and family, Mr. and Mrs. Freddie Pittman and family, Mother Willie Pearl Reed and family, Mr. AJ and Mother Vera Rivers and family, Deacon and Mrs. Willie Colson Jr. and family, Deacon and Mrs. Greg Frederick and family, Deacon Johnny and Sister Vera Perry and family, Mother Mary Benjamin and family, the Blight family of Vienna, Georgia, Mother Carlton Wallace and family, Mr. Charlie and Miss Watine Jackson and family, Mr. Ernie and Miss Lisa Bryant and family, Mrs. Lavinia James and family, Mrs. Vet T. Crane and family, Pinehurst, Georgia, Mother Willie Mae Walker and family, Mrs. Lily Crane and family, Mrs. Shante K. Bowens and family, Mrs. Patsy Carter and family, Miss Mary Taylor and family, Deacon and Mrs. Zachary Fields and family, Deacon Tommy and Sister Gradine Ford and family, Mrs. Lucille G. Harris, retired educator. Mrs. Mary Frances Davis and family. Mr. Joseph Glenn and family. Mother Willeen McGill and family. Mrs. Geraldine Harvey and family. Mr. and Mrs. Judge Glenn and family. Mrs. Nettie Whitis and family. Miss Burrow Patrick and family. Miss Corrine Passmore, family. Mrs. Gail Chanel Williams and family, Mrs. Dorothy Rose Jones and family, Mr. Frederick Hardeman and family, Mrs. Aletha Askew, church clerk and trustee of the New Oak Grove Baptist Church, the Reverend and Mrs. Dion Jones and family, Mrs. Annette Stembridge and family, Mrs. Eddie Mae Cooks and family, Mother Jessie Kate Harmon and family, Mr. Donald and Mrs. Ruby Daniels and family, Mother Hazel Daniels and family, Minister Gardner and Ms. Beulah Morgan and family, Mrs. Maggie Harmon and family, Mrs. Fanny Bivens and family, Poland, Georgia, Deaconess Connie James and family, Mrs. Mary Applin and family, Miss Geraldine Ford and family, Deacon Earl Leary and family, Miss Patricia Leary and family, Mr. Eddie Leary and family, Miss Mitt Redding and family, Mr. William Carter, and the entire Carter and Leary family of Hatley, Georgia, Mrs. Minnie Redding and family, Miss Geneva Curry and family, Mother Martha Westbrook and family, the family of the late Mother Lucille Westbrook, Mr. and Mrs. Lonnie Walker and family, Mrs. Carolyn Jackson Hicks and family, Miss Ann Ross and family, Miss Aletha Brown and family, Miss Burnell Werbin and family, Deacon and Mrs. Frank Brown and family, Deacon and Mrs. John Mathis and family, Mr. Simon Felder and family, Mrs. Johnny Bell Sanders and family, the Reverend and Mrs. Keith Lewis and family, Mr. and Mrs. George Reichert and family, Miss Pamela Law and family, Mr. Harvey C. and family, Miss Blottyville and family, Miss Maddie West and family, Mr. and Mrs. John Leroy Perry and family, the Cantrell family, Elder and Mrs. L.C. Cantrell and family, the Hardwick family, Miss Marion Felton and family, Mrs. Bobby Jean Vandrew and family, Miss Christine Kingdom and family, Mr. and Mrs. Purdell Lately and family, Dr. and Mrs. Thaddeus Lately and family, Miss Dorothy Lamar and family, Deacon Willie C. Kendrick and family, the Clee Crawls family, Mrs. Prescynthia Woodson and family, Miss Rosa Cooper and family, Miss Lily Mae Perry and family, the Mike Hamilton family of Lily, Georgia, Mr. and Mrs. Emerson London family, the Granville family, Mrs. Arthur Lawson and family, Mrs. Calvin Baskin Jr. and family, Mr. Frank Thomas and family, Mrs. Molly Williams and family, Mrs. Shirley Jean Taylor and family, Deacon John David Law and family, Chairman of the Board of Deacons of the Evergreen Baptist Church of Pinehurst, Georgia, Mrs. Evelyn Thomas and family, Miss G. London and family, Mrs. Eunice Lewis and family, Mrs. Claudia Mae Dawson and family, Mr. and Mrs. Frank Armin and family, Mr. Randall Lango and family, Mrs. Minnie Jewel Duhart and family, Mr. and Mrs. Wayne Adams and family, Ms. Natty Lee Burks and family, Mr. Tommy Rogers and family, Mr. and Mrs. Willie Lee Taylor Sr. and family, the Crosby family, the Mike Williams family, Mrs. Maddie Ruth King and family, Deacon and Mrs. Bruce Kendrick and family, Mr. Roger Duhart and family, Ms. Doris Duhart and family, Ms. Nora Lee Adams and family. Our first selection for this morning.
each and every one. So the message we want to do now is give it back to him. That's what we want to do. We want to take the Lord, take the harmony, and give it back to him.
I'd like to thank Mr. Kelvin Pless of Americas, Georgia, and the members of Mary Gospel Workshop for providing our music this morning. Our next selection this morning is dedicated to the following: Miss Martha Clay and family, Deacon and Mrs. John Eddie Wiggins and family, Deacon Williams and Sister Robbie Durham and family of Albany and Cordell, Georgia, Mr. and Mrs. Sammy Hill and family, Mr. and Mrs. Paul Johnson and family, Mr. and Mrs. Ernest Reese and family, Deacon Eddie Porter and family, Mr. Denise Denard and family, Mr. and Mrs. Melvin Jones and family, Mrs. Carolyn Jackson and family, Pastor and Elder Billy Sanford and family, Deacon and Mrs. Alfred Hoggebrook and family, the Foster family, the Gamble family, Mr. and Mrs. Buford Royal Jr. and family, Mrs. Dora Taylor and family, Mr. Tawana Leonard and family, Mrs. Jacqueline Leonard and family, Mr. Robert Lee McLeod and family, Mr. Charles McLeod and family, Ms. Nettie Bush and family, Mr. and Mrs. Alvin Beal and family, Mother Minnie Fletcher and family, Mrs. Ruby Felton and family, Brother and Mrs. James Leon Hughes, and the members of the Church of Christ at Hilltop, Mrs. Charlie Butts and family, Ms. Linda Askew and family, Mrs. Janice Montford and family, Mrs. Dorothy King, mother and daughter, Mrs. Fanny Royal and family, Mr. and Mrs. Eugene Ford and family, Ms. Johnny Campbell and family, the Spears family of Chris County and Turner County, the Reverend and Mrs. Charles Perry Jr. and family, the Bolton family, Deacon and Mrs. Rodney Teal and family, Dr. and Mrs. Henry Young and family, Ms. Betty Roberson and family, Mrs. Ida Ruth Bryant and family, Mr. and Mrs. Jerome Outlaw and family, the Reverend and Mrs. Willie E. Lockett and family, Mr. and Mrs. Jerry Lester and family, the King family, Deacon Michael Holden family, Ms. Vivian Telfair and family, the Hayward Hopper family, the Venable family, the Reverend and Mrs. Douglas Parham and family, Miss Cynthia White and family, Ms. Irma Tyson and family, the Reverend and Mrs. Ivory Corbin and family, Mr. Ernest Kears and family, Judge Gail Sim and family, Miss Betty Dotson and family, Miss Sarah Henderson and family, Mr. Terrell Wilson and family, Mr. Herman Neal and family of Ashburn, Georgia, Miss Sandra Jackson and family, Dr. Eutha D. Dydale and family, Miss Mary Kinchin and family, Miss Betty Wallace and family, Miss Serena Williams and family, Mrs. Marion Street and family, Mrs. Curtis Ezel and the staff of BJ's Diner and the entire Felton family, Mrs. Ruby Jones and family, Mr. and Mrs. Roosevelt Williams and family, Mr. Anthony West and family, Mrs. Willie Mae Jones, Willie Ruth Jones and family, Mrs. Isaiah Carter and family, Mr. Benny Hamilton and family, Mrs. Dan Colson and family, Miss Ruby Colson and family, Miss Valerie Royal and family, Dr. Ruby Jackson and family, the family of the late Reverend Grover Mathis, Mrs. Juanita Mathis and family, Mr. Michael Lane and family, Mr. and Mrs. Governor Arnold and family, Deacon and Mrs. Garrett Parham and families, Johnny Bell and family, Mother Mary Hall and family, the entire Hall and Fish family, Ms. Bessie Slay and family, Ms. Regina Bryan and family, Mrs. Brenda Den and family, Mrs. Clorinda Hicks and family, Mr. Earl Passmore and family, Mr. Larry Passmore and family, Mr. Lewis Harry L. Sr. and family, Mrs. Yvette Zanders and family, Mr. Alvin Jones and family, Miss Rosa Rice and family, Deacon and Mrs. Grandy Ridley and family, Mr. Henry Wheel and family, Mr. Ricky Smith and family, Mrs. Daphne Askew and family, Mrs. Minnie L. Passmore and family, Mrs. W.J. Billingsley and family of Unadilla, Georgia, Miss Stephanie Westbrook and family, Miss Sherry Royal and family, Mr. Willie James Young and family, Mrs. Shirley Washington and family, Mr. and Mrs. Michael D. Bruce and family, Mrs. Mary Jo Osley and family, Mr. and Mrs. Carl Westbury and family, Mrs. Charlotte Leonard and family, Mr. and Mrs. Franklin Jordan and family, Mrs. Dorothy Nadine Young and family, Ms. Rosetta Leggett and family, Ms. Donna Lester and family, Mrs. Jacqueline Wheeler and family, Mr. Kelvin Whitfield and family, Mr. Alton K. Brown and family, Mrs. Rhonda Lester and family, Mr. Calvin Ford and family, Mrs. Christine Kinchin and family, Mrs. Annette Leary and family, Mrs. Ira Robinson and family, Mr. Steve Jackson III and family, Mr. and Mrs. Olin Askew and family, Miss Cynthia Rush and family, Mrs. Dorothy West and family, Mrs. Regina Smith and family, Mrs. Cynthia Webb and family, Mrs. Nettie Barnum and family, Mrs. Lewayne Harriel and family, Mr. Bert Kinchin and family, Mr. and Mrs. Alvin Lester and family, Mr. Robert Ford and family, Deacon and Mrs. James Askew and family, Mrs. Alice Henry and family, Mr. and Mrs. Donnie Brown and family, Mr. Tony Stubbs and family, Mrs. Annette Whitfield and family, Mrs. Cornelia Brown and family, Mr. Harold Bryan and family, Mrs. Dorsey Owens and family, Mr. Arnett Holmes and family, Mrs. Athaline Perry and family, Mr. and Mrs. Clarence White and family, Mrs. Charlie Mae Peacock and family, Mr. and Mrs. Bobby Anderson and family, Mrs. Nettie Mae Wise and family, Mrs. Alton Jordan and family, Mr. and Mrs. Scotty Grant and family, the Clee Cross family, Mr. Clayton Dykes and family, the Charlotte Cheney family, the Clayton family, Mr. Harry Bird Jr. and family, Mrs. Carrie Wheeler and family, Mrs. Lucia Bryant and family, Mr. Michael Sanders and family, Mrs. Lily Brown and family, Mr. and Mrs. Eddie James Walker and family, Byronville, Georgia, the Burks family, the Reverend and Mrs. Lewis Burden and family, Deacon and Mrs. Albert King Sr. and family, the Hazel Clark family, Mrs. Harry Ward and family, Mrs. Ruthie Daniels and family, Mrs. Viola Green and family, Deacon George Jordan and family, Deacon Jerome Jordan and family, Mrs. Pearline Roundtree and family, Miss Sarah Coleman and family, Mrs. James Wise and family, retired educator Miss Margaret Jordan and family, Deacon Walter Brown and family, Mr. and Mrs. Winston Keaton and family, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Morrell and family, Mrs. Martha Harris and family, Miss Mary Morrell and family, Mr. Mandel Lee Johnson and family, the Lester family, Mr. James Byram and family, the Whitfield family, Mr. and Mrs. Joe Clark and family, Vienna, Georgia, Ms. S.M.A. Davis and family, Ms. Odessa Sheffield and family, Ms. Benita Armstrong and family, Mr. Edgar Lee and family, Deacon and Mrs. Willie Fields and family, Mrs. Christine Jordan and family, Mr. and Mrs. Willie B. Barnes and family. It is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcement. Deacon Ezel Shelton Jr., age 92, 103 Burden Circle, Americus, Georgia, died Saturday, October 14th at the Magnolia Manor of Marion County in Buena Vista, Georgia. The funeral service for Deacon Ezel Shelton Jr., age 92, will be held today's Sunday, October 22nd at 2:30 p.m. in the sanctuary of the Friendship Baptist Church in Americus, Georgia. Bishop Melvin McCluster, his pastor, the Reverend Dan Shealy, pastor of the Mount Zion Webster Baptist Church, will officiate. The burial will follow at Staley Memorial Garden in Americus, Georgia. Mrs. Anquinette Anderson Bryant, age 61, of 1969 Laurel Lane, Decatur, Georgia, died Tuesday, October 17th at Amis Hospice in Decatur, Georgia. The funeral service for Ms. Anquinette Anderson Bryant, age 61, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors, serving Cordele and Vienna, are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Our next and final selection for this morning is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones were laid to rest during the past week. The family, Miss Joyce Ann Whitis Polk of Cordele, Georgia. The family, Mr. Henry Cleveland Gaines Jr. of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mother Bobby Lou Anthony Woodham, age 101, of DeSoto, Georgia. The family of the infant McKinney Latanya Royal of Sylvester, Georgia. This selection is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones will be laid to rest during this week. The family of Deacon Ezel Shelton Jr. of Americus, Georgia. The family of Ms. Anquinette Anderson of Decatur, Georgia, and Vienna, Georgia. This election is dedicated to all sick and shut in, to all patients in the local and surrounding hospitals, nursing homes, and rehabilitation centers, to our beloved ministers and their devoted family members, to all retired educators, to the men and women serving in armed forces, both stateside and abroad, to all veterans, and to everyone who listens to our program on each Sunday morning. It's a pleasure for us to bring it to you. Our program goes out in memory of our past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams, to my wife, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, to my son, Jai Wilkerson Parker. This selection goes out to my mother-in-law, Mrs. Billy Ann Hall and family. Goes out to my brother, retired Chief Master Sergeant Norman F. Dexter, and his wife, Dr. Gwendolyn Maxine Dexter, and their grandson, Noble. Selection goes out to my sister, Mrs. Patsy Jackson, and her husband, Jim Jackson, of Cordele, Georgia. The selection goes out to my niece, Mrs. Vera Mathis, and family, Mrs. Florine Montfrey, Manning, and family, and the entire Manning and Montfrey families. This selection goes out to Mrs. Rosalind Johnson, my niece, who celebrated her birthday on October the 10th. So say happy birthday to Mrs. Rosalind Johnson Porter, better known as Pig. This selection goes out to my nephew, Deacon Kenneth Smith, program chairman of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Baptist Church. Our pastor, Dr. K.M. Williams, again invite you to Men Day celebration this morning at 9:30 a.m. at Greater Morris Tabernacle Baptist Church this morning at 9:30 with Sunday school at 9 a.m. with the superintendent, Deacon John Stubbs, in charge of the Sunday school, followed by Men Day, and each of you are invited to attend. This selection goes out to Mr. Cleveland R. Lemon, oldest staff member of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home and steward of the Bethel CME Church here in the city of Cordele, Georgia. This selection goes out to our beloved Miss Easter May Sanders and family, goes out to the Reverend Johnny Dean, who celebrated an anniversary during this past Sunday at the New Poplar Spring Baptist Church in Byronville, Georgia. I'd like to say congratulations to him and the church family at New Poplar Springs, Byronville, Georgia. This selection goes out to our brother, Deacon Jimmy Charles Montfrey, chairman of the Board of Deacons of the Crossroad Baptist Church, and our pastor, Reverend Nelson Maynor, and the entire Maynor family, his beloved mother, Mother May Maynor, entire Maynor and Harvey family. This election goes out to the mayor of the city of Vienna, Mayor Eddie Daniels and family, Mayor Juanita Kinchin of the city of Warwick, Georgia. This election goes out to my neighbor, Mrs. Theron Jones and family, the entire Jones and Tarbert family, Deacon John Stubbs and family, Deacon and Mrs. Donald Tarbert and family, and Mrs. Juanita Mathis Kinchin and family. And again, to each of you who listen to our program on each Sunday morning, it's a pleasure just to bring it to you. God bless you.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We hope you've enjoyed our program. Tune in again on next Sunday morning. And remember, in your time of need, contact the competent, capable, and dependable staff at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.